Well, it's that time again when we take a look at some of the top stories in the state. Join me, of course, is John Durkee from Public Radio Tulsa. John, it's good to see you back again.
Good to be back.
Also from the Tulsa Beacon, we have Charlie Big. Charlie, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Good
I
to be
haven't
back.
seen either one of you guys since last season.
Yeah.
I'm glad you weathered
We weathered the summer.
space.
We've been in the green room.
Yeah, it's been in the green room. That's why I couldn't get in. All right. Well, first piece up. State revenue down again, this time by 3.5%. That's been going on for months. Oil prices are still down, and we got an income tax slated to take effect first of the year. Bottom line is our budget outlook is bleak for the coming year. Who's going to get hit hardest?
I think all of us. What I'm hearing is a $1 billion budget shortfall. And if that comes to pass, then it's going to be very difficult for education, for public safety, any of the core services to be, I don't want to say adequately funded, but I guess that's the best word to use, adequately funded, from where I see it.
Charlie?
Well, last year in the fiscal year, they had a $611 million shortfall, and the way they handled that was there was they used about some money from the rainy day fund. They used money from reserve funds from the agencies, and they also borrowed money. They borrowed bonds, $120 million, to redo the Capitol. So there's a little bit of give and take there this year again, I think, in those reserves funds, because some of them are pretty big. The budget that was passed by the legislature, the governor said was about a 1% decrease. So the question is how that's going to filter out and how some of these agencies are going to be affected in terms of losing their reserves.
So it's going to be belt tightening city around here, more than likely.
And the reserves, is that what they're calling the revolving funds?
Yes, yeah. You can't operate without money in the bank.
Right, right.
Even school districts and cities, and they go from fiscal year to fiscal year. You have to have some reserve in there, and that's going to be cut back, I think.
Well, that brings me to our next topic, which is schools facing a major crisis. We already know they're facing money shortages, but school enrollment continues to go up. Space is getting more and more cramped. We had to borrow from Paul to pay Peter just to get the extra teachers we need in here on a part-time basis, but statewide they're still down 1,000.
And actually they did, go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
They certified 400 more teachers today.
Did they?
Emergency certifications, the state board.
We're in a sad state of affairs. What are we going to do? How do we fix this?
Well, one of the things State Speaker, he suggested that they give teachers a $1,500 bonus, sign-on bonus. And he said they could get the money from the Department of Education, which is spending about $1.5 million on ACT testing for all juniors next year. There was Hoffmeister made that proposal. So he said maybe there would be a better use of funds to, when there was 1,000, he made a suggestion when there was 1,000 vacancies to give them $1,500 as an incentive to try to get those spots filled.
And to get retiring teachers back into the classroom and not to leave. Yes.
Well, to me, what you guys just talked about, though, with budget crunches coming, isn't that going to really cramp taking money from this pile and adding it to this pile for education?
Well, when you have a budget shortfall, there's the way and it is a budget shortfall. It's not an actual revenue shortfall yet, but there's still money in the rainy day fund. I think probably over $300 million. I'm not sure how much. And so you could raise taxes, but one of the things that
you know that won't happen.
Well, they are looking at the examination of tax credits, which is I would call corporate welfare. There's a lot of companies that under the Jobs Act and other things, they get all this money from the state, and it's in perpetuity for some of them, and they're saying now that there has to be a mandatory 4-year review by a commission that would be set up if this bill passes. And that would bring in revenue to the state if they kill some of those tax credits.
And they tried that last year, didn't they, that bill to review every 4 years?
Yeah, they
didn't go anywhere, but it seems like
But the governor is in favor of it, so if it passes, it would be something that would be, and I'll give you an example. In downtown Tulsa, the Tulsa World bought a building next door to them. They got a tax break for 6 years, I believe, a property tax break. And because they bought the building and renovate it, and the taxes they won't pay for those 6 years amount to like $1.2 million, which would have gone to Tulsa Public Schools, Tulsa Tech, the libraries. So they all agreed to this, but still it seems to me like corporate welfare.
John?
Ditto.
Okay. Well, then that brings us to our next issue, which is, should the state go ahead then with a planned tax cut the first of the year?
Well, I guess in 2015, the tax rate will go from 5.25% to 5% for state income tax. And it's scheduled to go in 2016, I think, to down 0.15% to 4.85%. But there's a trigger to that, and if the state revenues are not at a certain level, that won't be triggered. And I believe the figure, correct me if I'm wrong, for the quarter of a point reduction is like $200 million, and that is also triggered. So there is a possibility that those tax cuts might not ever have full effect.
Really?
Right.
That's what I've heard as well, is that it's really depends on what comes in.
Well, I know that this is the point where the state agencies are being told, don't come in here with a fat wish list. Tell us exactly what you need, no more, no less, and let's see if we can work this out like adults.
Yeah, I think that's what.
Which I think would be marvelous if they all behaved that way. All right, let's go on to the next one. All of these tax cuts that we've experienced in the last few years have been touted as a way to boost job growth. Oklahoma's, I just got my hands on this, Oklahoma's poverty rate is higher than the national average now. The Oklahoma Policy Institute says 16.6% of the people here live below the poverty line of $24,000 a year for a family of 4. More than 1 in 5 Oklahoma children live in poverty. Now, a lot of that can be attributed to first one thing and then another, but a great portion of it speaks to not only where the minimum wage is, but also for the fact that the jobs didn't seem to materialize the way they thought they were going to. What's the answer?
Well, we've added a lot of jobs, though.
But John, were they paying above 24,000?
Well, I think all of the jobs that we added at Macy's did that.
There's a problem that we're facing. Williams Companies is about to be taken over, I think, and they may move their whole, which has been a great local company with high-paying jobs for a long time, and they may, if they're taken over, which they probably will be, they may move. But we're fighting perception because Texas has no state income tax. Kansas, I think now has no state income tax. Florida doesn't. And so, and all these cities and states have funds, and they're giving money to these companies to move, and we're losing some pretty good jobs. We saw this a great exodus to Houston with the oil industry for the past 20 years, and I think that's one of our problems is not only we're not recruiting other companies to come in. We should be in California. Wisconsin has a full-time office in California to recruit dairy farmers from California to Wisconsin because there's a drought in California. Doesn't that make sense?
Odd situation, isn't it?
Yeah, and so we need to be courting people in California, businesses, and other places, and then we need to do what we can to keep the businesses here and the ones here that are healthy.
I remember,
Grapes of Wrath in reverse.
It is. Who's that coming down the road? Why, it's the Jones family. I distinctly remember because I moved here in the late 70s, early 80s, and oil had just crashed. And I remember seeing things that I thought I would never see. Small farmers going through with all their possessions on a flatbed and a sign that said "Lost the farm." It was flabbergasting just to watch it unfold, and there were auctions going on everywhere for farm property, for homes that couldn't be paid for. And another thing, when I moved here, it was very common to see Bentleys and Rolls Royce, Porsches and that sort of thing. That went away. That went away. But the words spoken by the politicians, and I remember this distinctly, was, well, since oil has gone away, what we need to do is change our focus to technology. In some corners of the state, they did that, and they're reaping the benefits. We haven't done it.
They've
Here-
been talking about diversifying our economy since,
Yeah,
Alfalfa Bill Murray. Raymond Gary back in the 50s, they had a similar crash. He was doing the same thing, saying we've got to diversify our economy.
hadn't been done.
We haven't done it yet.
All right, have we got time to go on to another one? All right, let's take another one here. Oklahoma healthcare, we got problems. I was not aware until recently how bad the problem is. I know rural healthcare in Oklahoma is in real trouble. In towns the size of Tulsa and larger, they're having trouble getting doctors in. And we're losing the doctors in the rural areas to the towns like Tulsa and Oklahoma City. But on top of that, rural hospitals are suffering, and I'm going to have to read this because I can't keep all my facts straight. I'm getting up in years, you know. They're suffering from the state's refusal to accept federal funding to underwrite Medicaid expansion for the thousands of uninsured working poor. Will that change? The war is over. The Affordable Care Act is law. It's been upheld by the Supreme Court. Okay, the battle's finished. Now can we take the money that we're paying our taxes toward?
I don't think it'll happen in Oklahoma until Barack Obama's out of office.
Why? We've got people hurting.
I understand that.
I mean, I'm not getting on to you, John.
I didn't hurt them. Maybe I did. Didn't mean to.
I'll tell you, the poor people in Oklahoma and in Tulsa too have a rough time because every level of their monthly expenses is going up. I mean, we have energy costs is going up, even though gasoline is down a little bit. But the working poor, you mentioned, there are a lot of companies now that, how many people know somebody that was working 40 hours a week and now they're working 29 hours a week?
Yeah.
Because the company said, look, we cannot pay the premium for the health insurance because it's gone up so much, and yet that person is working and they make too much money to qualify for Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a real problem, is that people in the middle, and young people especially,
Being squeezed.
just out of college,
Yeah.
that are not making that much money, and yet they have to, and their deductibles have gone through the roof. I mean, $6,000 or $7,000 that used to be $500 or $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't afford to get sick anymore.
That's true.
It just seems borderline sinful, if not completely sinful, that we're paying the taxes on the money and the money's going to the other states. And we ought to be getting it.
That's happened in Oklahoma forever, though. And not just on health care, but transportation, gasoline taxes, that kind of stuff. We're a giver state. We
Oh,
don't get back.
so we'll bail Kansas out.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Cute. Move on to the next one. The Affordable Care Act, which I mentioned earlier, is now law. It's officially law. Yet 15% of this state's population, that's over 500,000 people, don't have health care coverage, which translates into us paying for them and other folk who work. Somebody doesn't have health insurance, they go to a hospital, which has to take them, has to treat them by law. They take them in, they treat them. Those costs are passed on to folks who have coverage. Insurance rates go up, premiums go up here, premiums go up there, and first thing you know, it costs an arm and a leg to get sick, so you better stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think this goes back to something we talked about earlier. We're paying the money out, but we're not seeing any of it benefit us. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how to get, unless we have an election a week. And even then.
That would cost us too. So.
Yeah. Charlie?
Well, I don't think the Republicans or the Democrats have an answer to this. I'm sort of a free market guy. I think, Insure Oklahoma has been a pretty successful program here in the state, and it is, I think 40% of the people that are eligible to that are not taking advantage of that.
Why is that, you suppose?
I don't know, except that, like I said, I know a lot of small business people. I own a small business, and they think, I'm scared to death now because of the cost of all this stuff. And I think I'd just rather give the people the money. You know, health savings accounts were actually, my accountant always wanted us to start one. They were very, very successful for some people, and those are going to be phased out because of, there's a Cadillac tax coming on those under Obamacare. So if your company said, I'm going to give you $10,000 this year, and you can buy your own insurance, and you put it in a health savings account, you're going to get like a 15% tax on that starting next year, I believe. So we're looking for solutions, and I'm not seeing much from either side.
Yeah.
Well, I've never seen, well, of course, I'm not that old. I'm kind of young and cute. You know how that works. You guys are all saying the same thing. But it seems to me like I'm not, I hate to use the phrase do nothing Congress. But the problems rest sorely with the Congress. Next week, we're taping this at a point where the budget, if it isn't passed, the government's going to shut down. I got a notice just today about what's going to happen with federal parks. I'd not thought of that, but it costs millions and millions of dollars when the federal parks are closed. And I was in Arizona the last time we went through this, and I saw parks, state parks closed there, and roadside rest areas closed. And I thought, wait a minute, there's some powerhouse folk from Arizona in Congress, and ain't nothing happening, and the truck drivers are sleeping on the freeway, literally. They'd pulled off the side of the freeway to get rest. And you'd see 8, 10, 14 big rigs out there parked. I'm worried, man, this is going to hit with a vengeance this time, because we haven't fully recovered from the last one.
Well, I don't think the Republican leadership, even though the conservatives in the House and the Senate both want to buck up against funding for Planned Parenthood and some other things, I don't think that they're going to be able to get anything passed that would prevent a continuing resolution, because every time that happens, the Republicans get the blame for it, whether they deserve the blame or not. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think they want to take the hit. So I think conservatives like Jim Bridenstine are very upset about that, but I don't think there's going to be a shutdown.
You don't think there will be?
No.
What about you, John?
I'm kind of with Charlie. I don't think they will, because it's an election year, and you don't want to take that hit in an election year.
A lot of tragic results all the way around. I hope they know that. Closer to home, is Stanley Glantz going to survive? We talked about this before. Back when this all started, everybody was, yeah, he'll make it. Questions are getting more serious. He's testified personally before the grand jury now. And there was an article in Tulsa World, pictures about everybody that's been there. And I'm wondering, is the pressure to get rid of Stanley growing?
I think it is. I think there's pressure mounting on him, and new revelations coming out about the office. There was a story last week that came out where the sheriff was speaking to a group of people and was talking about threats that had been made against him and the department. Well, the public information officer for the sheriff's office came out and said, well, the sheriff misconstrued that information. That's not really what we were saying. And we're seeing even more of this stuff coming. And so, yeah, I think the sheriff may be in trouble.
Some of his friends, I think, are kind of urging him softly to, he's got 1 year left in office, why don't you go ahead and step aside now? But I think he's kind of buckled down and said, I'm going to make it through that the end of that term. But I tell you, the core issue, I think, in this whole thing is, do the Tulsa County sheriffs and deputies, are they unfairly targeting minorities? And is that a problem? Is it a racial problem within the Tulsa County Sheriff's Department? And I haven't seen sufficient reason to think that it is a serious problem. Obviously, it exists, to some extent, any place. But I don't think that one shooting was a case where they wanted to find a black guy and shoot him. So I don't know how we deal with that bigger issue.
Yeah, I don't think it was a racial issue. It's more of a training issue and not following the rules and regulations.
Paperwork.
Yeah, that's what I think is going to catch him.
Okay, I hate to do this, but we got time for one more. This next one, and I'm going to jump into this. You already know the story about the American dentist that shot the lion that turned out was a protected.
Yes.
Don't laugh.
I'm not laughing.
You know where I'm going with this. Well, that issue wasn't funny. Anyway, in Oklahoma, though, Senator Jim Inhofe continues to hold his annual pigeon shooting fundraiser, and it doesn't seem to spark any outrage at all, except for one group out of, I believe, Illinois, who came in here, to protest it. Nobody picked up on it. They're still animals. They're still live animals. They take them out of cages and toss them, and people shoot them and, giggle and grin. But this guy brings with him a drone this time, to, I guess, get pictures. The drone goes up, the drone comes down. He says participants at the pigeon shooting fundraiser shot his drone down.
It looked like a dove.
Was the drone shaped like a pigeon?
It makes one wonder. Should Inhofe stop the pigeon shooting? I mean, isn't the principle the same?
It's Oklahoma. We love our guns.
Yeah, okay. Well, I see this is not going to work. All right. So you don't think then that we need to?
Well, what he's doing is legal.
Well, yeah.
Whether it's.
But
the
Charlie,
best-
there's legal and there's right. I mean, there's a difference.
Right. The guy in Africa, we don't know if he's. But what he said was he didn't know that he was shooting a lion that was, shooting it illegally. So until they prove otherwise, I'd have to kind of take his word for it. But this is a state where we kill animals. I mean, that's just part of it.
Boy, that's for sure. Well, finally, I got 30 seconds. If we can get this in about Oktaha, no Muslims at the gun shop. One of the guys drops a gun, shoots himself. He's going to be fine. The gang that couldn't shoot straight brought us national attention. Was it deserved?
Probably.
Oh, yeah, it was not handled very well.
No.
Well, the sheriff said safety rules were not being followed.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time, and tell everybody I said hey.
I will do.
Okay.
That's all the time we have. I'm Sam Jones. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Perspectives.